For our assignment 6, all right, let's just understand the flow, okay, and try to come up with a high level pseudocode or flowchart, okay, before we actually get into the programming. All right, so what we are required to do is we are required to prompt the user to enter some numbers, okay, and we are not known upfront how many numbers to expect. All right, so it could be 2 numbers, 3 numbers, 10 numbers, 100 numbers. All right, so it could be any number of inputs. All right, but the moment the user enters 999, that is the end of the input, correct? And then what we must do after that is we must do 2 things. We must compute the average, okay, and then print it out, okay. That is of course shown here. So as you can see in this first instance, we have 3 numbers, okay. It could have been more. Here got another 3 numbers, and here I got no numbers. All right, straight away I entered 999, okay. And over in the question here, it is also mentioned that you need to consider the case where there is no input, okay. So that is referring to this case over here, where the first input is already 999, so there is no actual number to compute the average from. All right, and this is important to consider because if you try to divide by a 0, because I got 0 inputs, you will get a error in the printout. All right, because a divide by 0 is not allowed, so you need to factor that in your code, okay, to make sure that if everything is a 0, that means the count is 0, then the average must also be 0. You cannot have a divide operation inside your code where the denominator is going to be 0. All right, and of course in the case where you have proper valid numbers, for example 5, 6, 7 and 8, you have the total sum here. All right, and then you divide by the number of inputs, which is 3, and you print out the result. And in this case you also want to print the result to be printed out up to 2 decimal places. Okay, so these are the requirements of the assignment. Okay, now how do you go about doing this? Okay, there are of course many different ways of handling this question, and I'm just going to show you one approach. Okay, so what you see is you need to have at least 2 variables, okay, one for the sum, okay, and the other for the count. All right, and what is important is both of them must have an initial value of 0. All right, and then what you must do is you must make sure that you have a loop that can run infinitely. All right, and if you look back at the way we have written the loops, we have the while loop and the for loop. All right, whenever you want to have a loop that runs for a known number of times, you can generally straight away use the for loop. But when you do not know how many times you're going to run it, you're going to use what we call an infinite loop. And an easy way to write an infinite loop is by using a while, okay, which I will show you later on in the code. All right, so what you want is you want to first initialize this sum and count to 0, and then you have a loop. Okay, so you have the start of the loop. Okay, start of loop. And in the start of the loop, what you do, the first thing is you ask the user for the number. Okay, so this is the enter a number. Okay, and after you get the number, what you want to do is you want to check if it's 999. Is it 999? Okay, if it is true, you go straight to the end. Okay, okay, so let's not call it the end for now. If it's true, you must go in and do the computation of the average. All right, but if it is not 999, it is a valid input. What do you want to do? You want to add it to the sum. Sum equals to sum plus num. Okay, so why is that so? So for example, now my initial value is 0, correct, in the sum. If I key in a value of 5, what I want is to say 5 plus 0 put back into sum, which is 5. So I want it to replace with 5. Alright, and at the same time, since I've keyed in a valid input, alright, I want to also increment my count value. count plus equals to 1. So my count value will increment to 1. Okay, and after I do these two things, I want to go back in to the start of the loop here. Alright, where I get the next number here. Alright, so of course I'm just drawing it to in a simplified manner. You can consider it as getting the number here or even here, the start of the loop. Alright, so again I go back to the loop, get a number. If it's not 999, so let's assume the second number that I key in is 4. Alright, so if the value is 4, definitely it's not 999. So what I'll do is I will take the current value, which is 5 plus 4. Okay, sorry, the new input is 4 plus the current value of 5 and put back inside will be 9. So this one will become 9. Alright, and the count will also increment, so the count will become 2. Okay, so these are two things I will do, then I will repeat. Okay, so now let's assume that the third time the loop runs, it is 999. Alright, then what happens? If the third time the loop runs, I key in a value of 999, this condition is true. So what must I do is I must exit from the loop. So I will not go back here and repeat the loop. I'll come out of the loop. Okay, so this is where you exit the loop. Okay, and once I exit the loop, what do? I must be able to print out the sum and the count, okay, and the average. Okay, now if of course what I mentioned just now is you need to also check whether the count value is 0. So is count equals to 0. Okay, if the count value is equals to 0, then if that is true, that means I just straight away go in and say that my average is 0, count is 0, and sum is 0. So all three will be 0, because if count is 0 means that means there was no valid input entered when the program started to run. Correct? So all three are 0. But if count is not 0, that means it is a valid input. Then what do? I need to compute the average. So I say average equals to sum divided by the count, and then I print out the average. Okay, and basically after that is the end of the program. Alright, so that is basically the entire pseudocode, okay, for the assignment 6 here. Alright, so now that we understand this part, let's go on to actually writing the code, okay, for the assignment 6. Alright, so now let's get started with our coding here for the assignment 6. Now the first thing, looking back at our flow chart, we can see that we want to get two variables, sum and count, and we put them to 0. So I'm going to say summation equals to 0 and count also equals to 0. Okay, and what I said is we want to write an infinite loop, and how you do that in Python is to say while 1. Okay, while 1 means 1 in logic sense, 1 is true, 0 is false. So while 1 means that this condition to repeat the loop is always true. It's always true, so the loop is an infinite loop. Alright, and what I want to do now is I want to capture the user input. So how do I do that? I can say num equals to input, okay, enter a number, and I can say 999 to quit. Alright, and of course since I'm capturing the input and I want to interpret it as an integer, I can straight away cast it to an integer here. Alright, and I just need to put an int here, so this whole input is straight away cast to an integer. Alright, and if you look back at our flowchart, what we said is if num is equals to 999, we want to immediately exit the loop. How do we exit the loop? We use the break statement. Alright, so we have seen this before in an earlier video. So the break is to break away from the loop and go to the line just after the loop. Alright, so if my input is 999, I will break. Else, so if else is also something we have studied before in one of the earlier videos. So if this condition is not true, that means I have a valid input. If I have a valid input, I must do two things. I must add that input to the summation. Alright, and I must also increment by count. Correct? Now, what is the next thing I must do? I must also so that is all the things that are confined within the loop. Alright, now the next thing is of course printing out the summation and count and the average. Alright, now I can do that first. I can do the print of summation. So I can say summation equal summation variable here, and count equals to count value here. Okay, so that is your summation and count. Now for the average, we know average is summation divided by count, but since a divide by 0 is not allowed, we should not perform the division if the count value is 0. Correct? So I need another if else statement here. If count equals to 0, then I just say that the average, okay, equals to 0. Alright, else average equals to summation divided by count. Okay, so this if else is to check that the count value and decide how to perform the average computation. Because if the count value is 0, you do not want to have a divide by 0, so I straight away assign average to be 0. Alright, if the count value is not 0, that means I do have some valid inputs, then I compute the average as summation divided by count. Alright, and the last step here is to print the average. So print average equals to, alright, now the thing is we want to make sure we print out in 2 decimal places. So this is something new that you're going to learn here. Alright, how do I print out in 2 decimal places? Alright, so I need to use the curly braces operator here, and I put a colon dot 2f. Okay, and here I need to make use of the dot format average. Okay, let me close the curly braces here. Yes. Okay, so basically what does this dot format do? This dot format is to actually format strings, okay, to perform specific actions. You may have seen it in some other videos or in our own series of classes. You are also going to be seeing this very soon. But just to give you a heads up, format is used for string formatting. Alright, we can use it for a lot of different applications. Here what I'm showing you is how it can be used to perform a printout up to specific number of decimal points. Alright, so that basically sums up the entire code. Alright, and just to run through the whole flow with you, we have 2 variables declared to 0, summation and count. We have an infinite loop where I capture the input. As long if the input is 999, I will break away from the loop. If not, it is a valid input, so I do the summation add as well as incrementing the count. Once that is done, I can print out the summation and count values, and to compute the average, again I check that the count is 0, not 0, then I do the division. If it's 0, average is 0, and then I print out the average value here. Alright, so let me save it and let's run the code here. Okay, so let's enter some numbers. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to key 999. Alright, so what you see here is you have 5 numbers, 5 valid numbers, and the summation of these 5 numbers is 25, and 25 divided by 5, I get 5. Alright, very good. Now let's try one more time. This time I'm just going to key in like the example shown in the question, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Again, I'm going to key 999. Alright, so 8 divided by 3 is 2.67. So again, up to 2 decimal places. I'm going to key in one more time here, just to show you what happens if I key 999 from the start. Straight away, it does not register any input, so the count is 0, which means the average is also printed out as 0. Alright, so feel free to try it out, okay, and see for yourself, okay, and ensure that everything is working out just fine. Alright, and in this assignment you have recapped quite a few things: your loops, your if-else statements, and of course I will also introduce you to the dot format string operator here. Alright, so I hope this assignment has given you a good refresher on many basic concepts in Python. Alright, thank you. Bye.